Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, and I'm back for another newsletter exclusive podcast. If you're encountering this podcast anywhere other than my newsletter, head on over to KimberlyNicoleFoster.co. That's KimberlyNicoleFoster.co, where stars are born and dreams are made. I don't know where I got that from. I just say whatever the Lord puts on my heart. Today, we're going to talk about the awfulness of Facebook. I mean, awfulness doesn't even accurately describe it. It's evil, it's nefarious, it's dark-sided. And also we have to dig into the disgusting cowardice of Facebook's founder, Mark Zuckerberg. What has inspired this foray? It's a book I just got finished reading called Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. I'll admit I got caught up in the hype. I read the book and it was surprisingly good, you guys. I was not expecting to be captivated. Sarah, in addition to being a supreme girl boss, she is a New Zealander. She is a lawyer. She got the job when she worked for the UN, and then she used her connections to get in touch with Facebook people. She literally created the position of Director of Global Public Policy for the company formerly known as Facebook, now known as Meta. She's an impressive lady, but not only is she an impressive lady, she's a great writer. I was shocked. So it was actually very easy for me to finish. I mean, maybe 6 hours, maybe. Really, really quick, easy read, but also a read that affirmed my most negative inclinations toward Facebook and its leadership and their motivations. I guess to go off on a little tangent, I've been thinking recently about this concept of fuck you money. There's this idea that you want to amass wealth so that whenever you want, you can go to your employer, go to a partner, go to somebody you're working with and say, I don't have to take this, fuck you. And for some people, that is true. I've said before, Elon Musk has adopted a kind of, I don't care what y'all say, a fuck you posture. But it's much more likely for people who have amassed enormous wealth and incredible influence and power, they become actually much more reactionary, much more conservative. It's almost like they allow their maneuverings to be guided by a fear, a paranoia that they will lose it all, lose power, lose influence. I mean, there's not a whole lot of billionaire courage. That's not the time that we're in. And maybe that has never been the time, but it's certainly not the time that we're in now. All right, but to get back to the book, Sarah Wynne Williams, Facebook's former director of global public policy, published this tell-all memoir called Careless People. And she also has filed an SEC complaint against the company. And the SEC complaint is about the ways that Facebook has been corresponding with the Chinese Communist Party in order to undermine U.S. national security, essentially. Like Facebook, because they are so desirous of being on good terms with China, because that is a huge potential market. Yes, this is all about market share. They are enforcing censorship on behalf of the CCP. They are corresponding with the CCP. They are sharing their data secrets, their technology secrets, particularly around AI, facial recognition, and content moderation with the CCP. And what I've really taken away from reading the interviews, we can even go back to the Facebook files from 2021, that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't really have politics. He does not have strong personal convictions. His primary personal conviction is how to optimize shareholder value, how to grow the company, how to keep people engaged, how to keep the stock price up, how to cement his place in society and in history as a very important founder, a technological innovator. So if you gotta work with Xi Jinping, you'll do it. If you have to kowtow to Donald Trump, you'll do it. Sarah has garnered all of these headlines because she is the highest ranking Facebook whistleblower to date. The picture that she paints is, as I mentioned, it's of a company that is willing to compromise human rights. It's willing to compromise its standing among its own employees. Okay, so the national security stuff is not this real stuff that really caught my eye, but people do care. So I'll just review. So Sarah says that she has documents that show that the highest Meta executives, the most visible Meta executives, were ready to build special censorship tools for the CCP in exchange for Facebook being allowed in China. Now, we know China has closed internet. Facebook essentially said, we will craft a specialized one-of-one surveillance architecture that would allow Chinese officials to be able to shut anything down at any time and help the Chinese government hunt whoever they want to hunt down. And even the documents, according to Sarah, explicitly acknowledge that those are tools that could be used to facilitate torture, death, incarceration of any of the users in China. Because we know the CCP does not care about human rights, baby. They will disappear you so damn quick. Don't say nothing about Xi Jinping. You're a goner. Don't violate those strict codes of morality and conduct. You're a goner. But you know what? Sitting here in 2025 as an American, we don't have any high horses to sit on. And that's why Donald Trump wants to be friends with Xi Jinping, because he wishes he had the exact same power, and he is doing his best to collapse all of our rights protection so that he can get as close to a Viktor Orban style, quote unquote, democracy, or a Xi Jinping style of exerting central executive influence as possible. But, you know, that's another story for another day. And yes, this book did provide me confirmation bias. I totally accept it, but I do think it is a useful document. We are at the advent of the artificial intelligence age, and as I mentioned in the previous podcast, I am deeply concerned by the grace, the benefit of the doubt, the assumption of benevolence that people are offering to these AI companies. It doesn't make any sense. What a book like Careless People exposes is these companies are deeply invested in projecting this idea to the world that they are deeply invested in the greater good, that they want to change the world for the better, that they want to connect people, or in the open AI case, that they want to democratize knowledge. But we know behind closed doors, they are incredibly calculating. They have already determined exactly how much human suffering that they're willing to tolerate for market expansion. You hear these tech CEOs talk about the mission. I mean, Sam Altman is really on this in his current war with Elon Musk. Altman will say stuff like, you know, Elon doesn't believe in the vision. He's self-interested. He only cares about enriching himself and self-aggrandizement. But, like, you're not? Like, that's the thing. Y'all are the same. What has taken me from techno-optimist to this very disconnected, pessimistic place? It's witnessing the astonishing, the profound moral bankruptcy of these actors that they try to cloak in a language of innovation and connection. The idea that we are all in this together. And some of these poor dopes, these gullible saps, myself included, we maybe believed in it. Of course, we understood that the financial rewards, the rewards of power and influence, of course, they trickle up to the people at the top, but that overall, generally, humanity would benefit, that we would all take a big step forward. I think in many ways, we've collectively taken steps back in measurable ways with regard to cognition. There are people who are very hesitant to acknowledge that spending so much time scrolling screens, engaging with algorithmically mediated platforms, that has literally rotted people's brains, that children have not developed cognitively in the post-social media world. And by the way, people try to blame that on COVID. No, we see the declines before 2020. That's how we know it's not COVID. We start to see the downward shift in young people's, children's ability to do complex, multi-step, multi-order thinking, cognition, memory, abstract thinking, analytical thinking. We start to see that before 2020. It's the fucking screen. It's the algorithm. Scramble. And the outrage for me comes from the fact that these people knew, if we go back to the Facebook papers from 2021, Frances Haugen, former Facebook engineers, her big intervention was the idea that they knew. She released thousands of documents to the Wall Street Journal, and they knew. And for years, there was this conversation about, now, why is it that the Silicon Valley tech CEOs, the billionaires, the executive class, why did they send their children to schools where there are no phones or tablets or screens allowed, where their interaction with the internet is highly regulated, but they are they are lobbying to further integrate these technologies into the educational experiences and everyday lives of 99% of the rest of this country's children? Why is that? And then finally, we have concrete, irrefutable evidence because they knew. To me, that's guillotine worthy. The fundamental betrayal of public trust goes beyond a corporate misstep or a corporate miscalculation. I don't know why more people aren't outraged about that. I don't have children. Now, I love children. Not all of them, but there are many children that I do love. But it's a tragedy. The other story from the book that really stood out for me was the company's just complete abdication of its responsibility in the genocide that happened in Myanmar against the Rohingya Muslim community. So this was in 2008, I believe. And so this happened because Facebook did not have coding tools, content moderation tools to decipher Burmese. So when the Buddhist groups were hosting all of this anti-Muslim hate speech, it wasn't getting properly moderated. And so that hate speech was allowed to proliferate and it got disseminated, and it has been cited. Okay, this is actually not conjecture. This is not speculation. There is a direct link between Facebook, which at one point was the front page of the internet for most of the world, that the proliferation of these ideas and the ginning up of the hate, the fomenting of the hate, the nastiness, the anger towards this minority Muslim community incited people, led them to commit genocide. And I believe that there are active cases against Facebook right now because of how they abdicated their duties. There is a story in there about how Sarah, because she's so high up, she and the other Facebook executives get noticed that there's violence taking off. And they're like, what do we do? They're trying to get control of it. And they can't get control of it because they only have one Burmese contractor. And the Burmese contractor, who might be able to cipher through the nasty, hate-filled, violent messages, he was at dinner and he didn't have his work laptop on him. Come on now. Now, that's just ridiculous for a multinational company, but it's especially ridiculous because Sarah reveals that the government of Myanmar had contacted people at Facebook to say, look, this is a dangerous situation. We are in a powder keg. People are dying. And these riots are triggered by the content on your platform. And the infrastructure of Facebook was so inadequate that they just couldn't respond. So we see that when Facebook wants to move, they move. When there is a potential profit opportunity, they move. But there is also simultaneously a disregard for human life. I mean, my jaw was on the floor. Okay, I know that we're talking about really serious things, but Nosy Kim has got to pipe in right now. While I was reading this book, the thought that just kept popping up in my mind over and over and over again. How much money do you think this lady made? A lot. Like, I understand that how much compensation she received is completely immaterial to her claims, but it's got to be like $500,000, right? Okay. Her official title by the time she left in 2017 was Global or Director of Global Public Policy. At least $500,000 all in. We have base compensation, maybe bonuses, and the stock options. Sarah, bitch, that's a rich ass lady. And no wonder, right? So let's connect it back to the idea of fuck you money, okay? Sarah has fuck you money for her. But for somebody who might not be deeply invested in actually improving society, actually telling the truth, I'm sure Sarah is a brokey, a multimillionaire brokey. And so, like, the idea of fuck you money, it's not real. Because there are people for whom there's no amount of money that will ever be enough to embolden them to risk anything, put themselves out on the line to tell the truth. But yeah, that's why that came up for me. The other thing I think was new for me in this book was because Sarah had so much contact with Mark Zuckerberg, she has a very particular and, to me, credible experience of who he is. And for all of this time, Zuckerberg was allowed to be painted as the boy wonder, the boy genius. He's just doing his best, the dutiful CEO. But she portrays him as a much more calculated and cynical figure. That earnestness, according to her, it's all an act. And I totally believe that. And if we're really giving Zuckerberg the benefit of the doubt, maybe that was a true representation of who he was back in the hopey, changey Obama era. In 2008, 2009 to 2012, we'll say, the first Obama administration. Okay, I might believe that. But now that we see Zuckerberg has taken the manosphere turn and done it so self-consciously, gone on Rogan and talked about how we need a return to masculinity and manliness. Ew. And you know what also just really, I know that having daughters doesn't magically turn men into feminists, but he only has daughters. Like, is that the world that you want to construct? The world where we talk about how masculinity is lost and manliness is lost. And I know that the Facebook employees kind of tried to push back because before Trump's inauguration, Zuckerberg brought in Dana White, the CEO, the founder of UFC, to the board of Facebook. For what? For fucking what? To get close to Trump? Because he knows that Dana White and Trump are very, very close. But Mark Zuckerberg, who led a company that previously had some actually really impressive diversity initiatives, actually. Facebook was one of those companies that have publicly expressed a commitment to equity and diversity and making the world better. And then Trump is going to come into office, so he brings in the man who is caught on camera slapping his wife. I mean, you can get this from the book, but you can also get this from reporting. I know the New York Times, the failing New York Times, has done a lot of good pieces on what has inspired Zuckerberg's transition. This is all a capitulation to Trump in order to protect his business interests. The FTC is about to file lawsuits and pursue prosecution against Facebook for their mismanagement of information and the free speech stuff and the monopoly stuff. Maybe Zuckerberg thought that cozying up to people who are good with Trump would maybe stop some of that action from moving forward. But I've heard the man who replaced Lena Khan, we all love Lena Khan, the lefties love Lena Khan. But he has said, his name is Andrew something, I can't exactly remember, but he has said, no, we're still moving forward in our investigations and prosecution of Facebook. So we'll see. But yeah, if you read the reporting, I've read some good stuff in the Times, in the New Yorker, and elsewhere. After Trump's election, Zuckerberg flew to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. Everybody got to fly to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. Zuckerberg, well, I should say Meta donated at least $1 million, maybe more. I need to go back and check, to Trump's inaugural fund. And we see these public announcements of Meta bringing in all of these conservatives. So the man who has the job that Sarah created now is a man named Josh Kaplan, who, by the way, Sarah says in the book, sexually harassed her at work, which that's another thing. The other thing about the Trump 2 era, we're bringing in all of the sexual harassers. We're bringing in all the woman beaters. Everybody gets a pass, okay? But Josh Kaplan, who is the current director of global public policy, has worked in Republican politics before he joined Facebook, has done his best to architect better relationships. The New York Times reporting that I read also said that Zuckerberg has explicitly hired somebody to help him recraft his messaging, recraft his persona to appeal to MAGA, not just normie Republicans, to MAGA and to Donald Trump, because Zuckerberg had gotten on their bad side. And that's really fascinating to me because in my mind, I think of Facebook as a place where the MAGA stuff flourishes and has flourished. It's just interesting to me that Zuckerberg would feel the need to remake his persona and public stances in the MAGA image when I'm like, when was Facebook ever antagonistic to the aims of MAGA? That is where the Ben Shapiros and the Bonginos and the Glenn Becks and the Candace Owens, like, they were able to use Facebook video to go viral on the platform. Like, what is the issue? But I mean, Zuckerberg is a coward, but Donald Trump is also incredibly transactional. It's pay for play, tit for tat. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours all day, every day. So I guess these are rational actions in the most crude sense of the term, but I'm just glad that I don't be on Facebook like that. I mean, I do use Instagram though. I do. So I am still helping to further enrich Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, I had to go back and look at some of my notes because I'm like, I know not too long ago I read something about this. Yes, okay. So by early January, Zuckerberg had assembled a small team to completely overhaul Meta's content moderation policies. And unlike typical policy changes that involve input from various stakeholders over months, this was a closely held 6-week sprint that blindsided even Meta's own integrity teams. So Zuckerberg made the process of adjusting the policy, the content moderation stuff, his orientation toward what's called DEI stuff, so insular, and the accountability mechanisms that Meta had willingly adopted earlier to make sure that it was doing the right thing, they were completely shut out of that process, according to the reporting. The other thing I wanted to say about this is I don't know what Mark Zuckerberg really thinks. I don't know how he, quote, really feels. I actually don't care about that. I don't care what's in his brain. I care about how he chooses to present that stuff publicly, because we know that it is carefully choreographed. It is dutifully scripted. It's architected. So what is he trying to do? One, I actually think Meta and Mark are trying to distract from the fact that while Instagram's still a good business, Facebook as a platform has been dying for a long time. And I went back and looked at some reporting around the content moderation stuff, and there were alarms raised about the decline in content moderation from a year ago really ramped up in the spring and into the summer. But Facebook, even before Trump was elected, had already been backpedaling on its commitment to content moderation. There are a couple of theories. They just thought it was too messy. It just took too much work. It was too politically, it always had them in the headlines, all of the horrible stuff that the moderators had to encounter. But also, I think it just cost them too much money. There is an expenditure problem because Facebook is just not the profitable platform that it used to be. Okay, so that's a part of it. They just don't want to pay people to do that work anymore. The other thing that makes me think that this is about a business fundamentals issue that Mark just opportunistically turned into my principles have changed and I love masculinity, okay? There was also a lot of talk, a lot of discussion about how Facebook enabled and encouraged the proliferation of AI slop on the platform. And they did that just to keep the engagement up. They were not interested in the integrity of the content. They weren't interested in the truthfulness of the content, the quality of the content, that they were encouraging contractors and Facebook users to crank out all of this stupid AI-generated shit because AI-generated shit engagement is better than no engagement. Right? Like low-quality engagement is better than no engagement, especially if you are trying to sell to advertisers that this is where they want to put their money. Yeah, it just makes a lot more sense for me to view this through the lens of desperation and not through the lens of genuine political transformation or radicalization. He doesn't have politics. Okay, another part of this that really pissed me off, that I love to talk about beauty politics. I'm deeply invested in the way that women, in particular young women and girls, are harmed. What Sarah makes clear in the book, and I've watched a couple of interviews with her about this book, that the business model, especially with regard to the self-esteem of girls, is much more predatory than I think most of us can even imagine. What really stuck out to me was her detailing how Facebook had developed tools that could determine when a teenage girl deleted a selfie. And the tools were they were empowered to discern or make assumptions about the girl's emotional state based on how quickly she deleted the selfie, when she deleted it. And there's an assumption that that action denotes insecurity about her appearance. And then those tools that were used to make assumptions about what a user's emotional state was when they were using the platform, including this emotional states of teenage girls, then they make determinations about what ads to show the person. And so a teenage girl who deletes a selfie and the AI tools determined that she was feeling insecure, that she was feeling low, would then use that information to show that presumably insecure girl ads about weight loss or ads about beauty products. Okay. So they are using these corporate surveillance tools to track behavior, track actions. Okay. Totally normal. Then they're using those corporate surveillance tools to say, what do these behaviors or actions say about how the user is feeling? Okay. And then they are using these corporate surveillance tools to say, what can we sell them based on what they are feeling? Okay, if we're talking about adults, that's one thing, but we're not always talking about adults. We're often talking about minors, teenagers, children, users that these very advanced corporate surveillance tools knew were children. Come on. And then the other story in the book was about, and by the way, Sarah's account only confirms and affirms what was revealed in the Facebook files from 2021. And isn't it interesting that both of these big whistleblowers, they're both blonde white women? I mean, I'm not connecting the blonde, like, but isn't it interesting that both of these big whistleblowers are white women? I know, like, we're suspicious of the liberal whites, as we should be, but there is a strain of liberal girl boss feminism. And those girl bosses are saying, we're fed up. We're pushing back. Now, they do wait to say we're fed up until after they've made their money, until after they have padded their resumes. So, there's definitely something to that. I mean, that's the thing about reading the Careless People book, right? So the writing is very engaging, very funny often. There's so many hilarious stories in there, but the hilarious stories underscore the incompetence of the people who are in charge. But then you always have to think, well, you saw all this stuff happen, Sarah, and you didn't quit. Was it after her first or second pregnancy? She had a horrible pregnancy. After she delivered her baby, she was in a coma, and her boss or somebody that she'd worked with, maybe it was Josh Kaplan, the man that I already talked about before, who is now the current director of global public policy, like, emailed her and was like, why have you been so unresponsive? Your team is telling me that they can't get in contact with you. And she's like, I was in a coma. Like, what's going on? I was in a coma. But she didn't quit. She stayed. She saw the Myanmar genocide and stayed. She saw the CCP negotiations and stayed. She saw the deliberations over the way that these tools were used to surveil the behavior of insecure teenage girls and sell them things, and she stayed. Now look, I'm a realist. Most people would stay. We only assign heroism, exceptional moral courage, and fortitude to the people who don't stay. So that's how I feel about that. I think that this is a really useful document. I know that lady is going to be harangued and harassed. Right now, she's under a gag order. Facebook will not allow her to continue to do interviews about the book because she did sign a NDA, and that NDA had a non-disparagement clause. But, you also have to raise an eyebrow and be like, you did collect all them checks. All the narratives are complicated. And in the book, she anticipates the criticism that I and other people, I'm sure, have had about, well, you were still there. You were still collecting the checks. You still sat in the meetings with Sheryl Sandberg and Zuckerberg and the other executives when they talked about the potential downsides for discourse and cognitive function and emotional regulation. And you still showed up for work the next day, even after you have been collecting those checks for a few years. She talks about, this kind of corporate environment being like when you place a frog in boiling water. What is the metaphor? You put the frog in the boiling water. If you try to dump it in the already hot water, it'll jump out. But you put the frog in the room temperature water and you slowly turn up the dial, and the frog doesn't try to jump out anymore. And she was the frog. I have a lot of empathy. I can have empathy for anybody. I get it. And, the girl bosses, we are just really working through the emotional damage of the girl bosses, the psychological damage of the girl bosses. There's a real deprogramming that a lot of the girl bosses have had to undergo. And Sarah has undergone her girl boss deprogramming, and this is where she's ended up. Okay, so where are we now? The lawless Instagram, Facebook era. I'm going to be honest with you. The other day, I saw some stuff on Instagram. I said, what the fuck is going on here? I thought that this was the platform where girls couldn't show their nipples. I'm 99% sure I saw some genitals on Instagram the other day. Girl. Okay. And there's a Wired report I remember from earlier this year where Facebook is now no longer, quote unquote, censoring speech that says gay and trans people are mentally disturbed. I believe the official policy is you can't call for violence against gay and trans people, but you can posit to your audience that all gay and trans people are emotionally disturbed and unwell and more likely to commit violence, that's within the bounds. So you can't say all the gay or trans people should die, but you can't say, well, maybe they might be better off dead because they're emotionally disturbed. And that is hashtag free speech in the Trump era. Again, all of this is just engagement. It's all an engagement play. That's it. More speech is profitable speech. Elon Musk does have politics. Like, he is actually like a proto-Nazi, Nazi-ish, Nazi-like. And so he is deeply invested in allowing the Nazi rhetoric to spread and go viral on X. Facebook is, at least the Nazis are coming. like that's it. Like, Facebook stands toward this is, hey, I might not agree with it, but at least the Nazis are posting. And that's where we are. Is it possible to hold a company like Facebook accountable? Not in the United States, not for the next 4 years at least. Europe has done some work around the Digital Services Act. To my mind, that is an actually really important intervention in trying to levy consequences for the dissemination of disinformation, the spread of violent, exploitative content. But, that Digital Services Act has made EU an adversary for the United States. That's what's so complicated about this time, is the Trump administration is simultaneously invested in these Red Scare tactics, these McCarthyist tactics to suppress speech, to attack people who say things that they don't like, but they're also trying to hold themselves up as the defenders and the protectors of free speech. And so they've just revealed themselves to do exactly what everybody else does. You support the speech that you like and you censor the speech that you don't. You're not better. I mean, that's the thing, is J.D. Vance, remember when he went to the Munich Security Conference and tried to lecture those European countries about quote unquote free speech and allowing the citizens to say things that the governments might disagree with? And now we see what the Trump administration is doing. It's wild. It is so insane. So anyways, there will be no guardrails erected in the US, but Facebook is a multinational corporation. Other countries, other regions will try to do what they can. But ultimately, I hope that the more conversations we have around this, the more whistleblowers who will be willing to come forward, and the more skepticism. And skepticism does not mean that you completely divest from using the platform or you say blanketly all technology is bad or harmful, but there is a kind of critical eye I think is useful when you're engaging with these things. What's happening? Why is it happening? Who is it harming? We got to critically examine the role that these platforms play in our lives, the role that they have in structuring public discourse, the role that they have in structuring mental health and mental capacity, because they're not free. I think we were willing to give up a lot because we said, well, at least, we don't have to pay. Well, I mean, now you kind of do have to pay, but people are literally paying money, but also we're paying in data, we're paying in attention, we're paying in focus, we're paying in cohesiveness, social cohesion, we're paying in our politics. The expense is enormous. And, this thing is so interesting to me as a former techno-optimist, social media obsessed lover of all of these platforms, because I remember the early days of Facebook. I remember getting on Facebook in high school and being so excited because it was so cool. I remember how central Facebook was to communication in college. Oh my gosh, Facebook was the place. It was the place that you went right after you got your college email address and you logged on and you could tap into the Harvard network and connect with all of the 2011 freshmen in the Facebook group. My college roommates, this was before we even knew about WhatsApp or GroupMe or whatever, but we would call it the thread. And all the girls who lived in the suite together, like we would just constantly post updates all day in the thread. We would gossip in the thread. We would upload media in the thread. It's a private Facebook group. So there's a real disappointment. You know, going back, I think a lot of us, if you're my age, you can remember when the posts were like, what are you doing? Like, Kimberly is, you know, and then you would post your status update. Like, what am I doing now? Y'all, there are memories on Facebook from my senior year of high school. Senior year. There was such a deep joy in getting your college email account and connecting with all of the incoming freshmen the summer before. Of course, there are so many memories on my Facebook page from the last year of high school, being in plays, traveling, you know, my 18th birthday, and then making the transition into college, and then uploaded pictures from first college parties, my 21st birthday. Like, that was the way we connected. It was a meeting hub. I said all that to say that we can never go back. Facebook in the mid-2000s, Sarah often talks about it, especially at the beginning of the book. She talks about it as a revolution. I wanted to be a part of this revolution, and it was. But, you know, all revolutions don't lead to positive or progressive change. There are revolutions, like the quote-unquote Islamic revolution, where the shit gets turned backwards. And ultimately, the people who bear the heaviest costs are the people who are already marginalized, okay? It's the women. It's the gays. It's the trans girls. It's the ethnic minority. It's the blacks. Anyways, I've gone off long enough on this. Y'all tell me what y'all think. Leave a comment down below.